back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. And today we're going to talk about a horror documentary. But before we get into it, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here, great would appreciate that. I want to give a quick shout out to Cablasto. He gave me a heads up that the documentary Pennywise, the story of it, was on Amazon Prime. This dropped back in 2021. I watched it last night, and I felt I wanted to talk about it, so let's get into this. Now, the miniseries came out in 1990 based on a book by Stephen King, as we all know. And back in the 90s especially, Stephen King miniseries were a big deal. They were like an event. And the miniseries itself in the 80s and 90s or TV movies were a big thing. I've reviewed a few TV movies during my time doing this channel, like Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, Bad Ronald, stuff like that. And the Stephen King miniseries in the 90s, especially for people my age that remember it, they were a big deal, and your whole family would gather around the TV and watch these miniseries over several nights. And I remember this was a huge deal back in the day. This aired in November, actually, and it was a huge success when it was released. And this documentary was really well done, and let's just get into it. All the players here from the movie, all the actors, except for a few, we'll talk about the ones that weren't here. But the director, Tommy Lee Wallace, is here. I've heard Tommy Lee Wallace talk about this before. He did an episode with Mick Garris on his podcast, and they went over this movie, and I've seen print interviews with him about this movie. And here it's really nice to see him talk about it at length and a deep dive on this film. We get Tim Curry here, who obviously played Pennywise. It was so iconic now, that image of him in the sewer and just doing all the wacky stuff he was doing in the film. We get Seth Green here in interviews, Richard Thomas, who played Bill. We get Dennis Christopher, who plays Eddie's here in interviews. Richard Mauser as Stanley's here. Tim Reed as Mike. He's in this documentary as well. Emily Perkins, who played young Beverly, is here. Brendan Crane's here. He was young Ben. All the younger actors and all the older actors were here, except for the ones that... Well, Annette O'Toole wasn't interviewed for this, but obviously the great John Ritter, Harry Anderson couldn't be interviewed because they passed away, unfortunately, and Jonathan Brandis couldn't be here because he passed away in 2003, the same year John Ritter passed away. Now, we do see them in behind-the-scenes footage and whatnot, but obviously they're not around to give us their thoughts on this miniseries. They go through the casting, the script writing. They interviewed a scriptwriter, Lawrence Cohen. He's heavily shown during this film. It's about a little over 2 hours, about 2 hours and 6 minutes long. It's a really well done documentary if you love the miniseries. Even if you're not and just like horror documentaries about the movies, check this out. This is one of the better ones. I wouldn't say it's my favorite one because there's some really kick-ass horror documentaries out there. Crystal Lake Memories is a great horror documentary. Never Sleep Again for Nightmare on Elm Street, etc., etc. But this is a really well done one about a miniseries that was huge at the time. It's a cult classic now. People pull it out every year. It's played on TV every year at Halloween time. It's one I remember watching when it aired originally. I remember Tim Curry's Pennywise made me scared shitless of clowns for a little while at that point in my life. He gives a wonderful performance, and it's great to see him here interviewed. We all know Tim Curry has some health problems, but he does give a good interview, and he talks about the makeup and coming off of Legend playing the devil. He didn't want as much prosthetics all over his face, so they cut down on what they had originally planned, what Tommy Lee Wallace and the special effects guys had planned for his face. They toned it down more, and Tim was very happy about that because he didn't want to spend weeks and weeks and weeks with a bunch of prosthetics all over himself. And they talk about how the kids were scared of Tim Curry because when he was all made up in Pennywise, even though he was a very nice man. And they really do give a lot of credit to Tim Curry's performance of why that film became or that TV miniseries became so iconic, which no doubt, when you talk about the It miniseries, you think about Tim Curry's Pennywise. You cannot, it's such an iconic image at this point. They also go into, like, Tommy Lee Wallace, even before they get into the casting, they talk about the script where the first night, the kids' night, was always the better part of the script. And by the time they went to Vancouver, he wanted Lawrence Cohen to come up to Vancouver to work on the second night with him, but Lawrence Cohen went off to work on something else, so he actually did a rewrite on the second night. And even though I like this miniseries, and even the remake movies, the second part is not as strong as the first part. The kids get the more interesting stuff to do. And once we get to the adults, even though the adults here are fine, I like all the actors here. John Ritter's great, Annette O'Toole's great, Harry Anderson, right down the line. I like all the actors, but the second part of it was never as good as the first part with the kids. That was always the best part of this. And then they talk about the effects, especially with the spider at the end, how Tommy Lee Wallace was never happy with it. Although they do show, there's a cool behind the scenes video of John Ritter with the remote control for the spider, controlling its head and some of its legs. And there's some of the other actors there. And he's like, this is pretty fucking cool. And it does look cool. But I remember even seeing it back then. Once we get to the finale, where they're battling the spider never looked the greatest. I would say some of this behind the scenes footage, the spider looks better there than it did in the film. Now, the special effects guys say that it wasn't shot properly or lit properly. Tommy Lee Wallace kind of blames that the spider was never came out the way they had talked about. So, there's a little back and forth on that. But they do interview the special effects guys. They're here to talk about the work they did. It's a really well done documentary. I enjoyed it a lot. It's very interesting to hear from all the actors except for the ones I said weren't there and the ones that obviously weren't there. The kid actors now grown up, like Seth Green, all these kids are adults now, but to see the people that played younger kids and then the adults there, the ones that are left with us getting interviewed was cool, and especially Tim Curry, hearing his thoughts on the film. And he said he enjoyed his time on the film. He enjoyed working with Tommy Lee Wallace. And it looks like Tim Curry him and Tommy Lee Wallace had some ideas of what they wanted Pennywise to be. But they said Tim Curry's the one who brought it to life, and he brought his own flair to it. And honestly, it's still very iconic performance, even with the remake of it. But even the remake of it, the first movie was the best one. The second one with the adults wasn't as interesting or as good as the first one. But yeah, overall, this is a great documentary. If you have Amazon Prime, check it out. If it's included with your subscription to Amazon Prime, so you can check it out. Highly recommend it. I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10. A 9.5 out of 10 for Pennywise, the story of it. Have you watched it yet? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Do you like the 1990 original miniseries? Which one do you prefer, the original 1991 or the remake of it? Leave that comment down below. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share this video. I would appreciate that. I'll be back soon with the review for Hero and the Terror, starring Chuck Norris. But until next time, bye.